it is that he wants. And that scene when he's in the bar with Sylvie, and she's saying, well, what is it that you want? What is it that you want? And he's sort of going through and discovering in the moment that, I want my friends back. Yeah. And that sense of community and connection is the thing that's become important to him. When in the very beginning, 15 years ago, he was a very isolated sort of character.
Well, I think you've hit upon something that I've been thinking about for 15 years. I think I was so grateful when we made the first Thor movie to have been given a narrative arc by the late, great Don Payne, who wrote the screenplay, which was filled with such pathos. And Loki's origin story is one of enormous pain and heartbreak. And in that film, he discovers he doesn't belong in Asgard, that he was adopted, and that he was an orphan and he was left to die on a frozen rock. And he feels on the margins immediately, this isn't my family, this isn't my home. And that grief is what then hardens into grievance, which becomes the engine of his villainy in Avengers. And it's that feeling of not belonging, not having a community. And I think the journey in Loki as a series is that he finds a community. He finds friends, and I think his relationships with Mobius and Sylvie particularly take on a shape that he wouldn't have recognized before. These are real relationships where he really cares, and it's extraordinary for a character of such elevation in a way that the center of him is remarkably human. He just wants his friends back.
Yeah, he's very relatable in that way. He's made mistakes, he's coming around, he's trying to rethink.
So many mistakes.
Yeah. Now, you're not only the star, but an executive producer on this show. Tell us a little bit about your creative involvement.
I have loved being an executive producer, and excuse me, the title for me represents practically a place at the table in the development of the story, in the development of the narrative and the course of the tone, the kind of imaginative space we were occupying as creatives. I was really passionate about creating a show that had conviction and sincerity and vulnerability, that leaned into these philosophical questions about fate and free will, that was able to be entertaining and had a propulsive momentum, but felt like it was about something. And I encouraged everybody, if I had any power to persuade them, to lean into the sincerity of those questions. That actually, that's where Loki works best, is when he's driven by very profound forces that feel very human, and excavating the big questions. And I was able to be in the writers' room with on both seasons. The first season was led by Michael Waldron, and the second season was led by Eric Martin. But those are such unique opportunities for us, certainly for me, because there's time to dream, there's time to free associate and write something on a whiteboard and discuss it. And I do remember, to your point, one morning coming in, and I just wrote "glorious purpose" on the whiteboard, and I said, wouldn't it be extraordinary if the spine of this season was that theme, that we were re-examining and redefining glorious purpose for Loki and for Mobius. What's Mobius's purpose? What's Sylvie's purpose now that she has done what she came here to do, which is kill He Who Remains? Can she live freely? Does she know how to? B-15 is an agent at the TVA, finds out in season 1 that she had a life on the timeline. Does she stay? Does she leave? What's the TVA's purpose? This morally ambivalent institution that they thought they were the good guys, but maybe they're the bad guys. can the institution be repurposed for something better? And those were really thrilling conversations, and sometimes it was, I had the privilege of leading the set, I suppose, and creating a tone. And one of the most enjoyable things about that was sometimes just lighting a bonfire underneath the scene, by which I mean reminding everybody the sort of basic truth of creating fiction, which is no matter how much writing and how much dreaming and how much planning you've done, when you're on the set, you've got to remember this has never happened before, and it matters. And the more you can commit to the thrill of that spontaneity, that these challenges that Mobius and Loki and Sylvie and OB and Casey and B-15 are facing, for them, they're real, and the stakes are high, and they have problems to solve, and the clock is ticking, and they've got to solve it now. And then when you're playing that game, it's just the most thrilling. That's when I love this job. Yeah.
You know, I've read that T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets was sort of an influential text for you during the creation of this season. Tell us a little bit about how this post-World War II text connects to the Asgardian god of mischief.
Firstly, thank you so much. You've clearly done an enormous amount of research into
I did a lot of Googling.
So I feel that's a huge compliment. Okay, this is the truth. At the end of the filming of season 1, I think we were in the last day of filming, maybe it was the day before, and Kevin Wright, our absolutely extraordinary producer of both seasons, came up to me in a tea break with Eric Martin, who had been on the writing staff of season 1. And he said to me, okay, I think this is the end of the first chapter. What's season 2 about? And I heard myself say, I just quoted a passage from the Four Quartets, which is a poem I love, and it's one of the, right towards the end. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. And I can't explain where it came from, but basically it was Eliot expressed far more eloquently and articulately than I could where I wanted to go, which was, we had broken this character down. We'd cracked his psyche open with existential doubt and crisis, but the journey wasn't over. And I thought, how do we bring it full circle? That's why that line, to arrive at where we started and know the place for the first time. And it became a kind of North Star. And it generated conversations between all of us. Like, what does that mean? Do we go back to the beginning? Where did we start? We started with a young boy who was a prince, who was told, only one of you can ascend to the throne, but you were both born to be kings. And is the ending a throne, but a throne that comes in a shape you would never recognize, and with a burden he would never have understood. And then going back to Glorious Purpose, that, sort of immortal line that he utters in Avengers, I am Loki of Asgard, I am burdened with glorious purpose. To arrive at where we started and know the place for the first time. As Mobius says, sometimes purpose is more burden than glory. And then I started reading the Four Quartets, and the poem itself is such extraordinary work of literature and art. Is very abstract, and I think is Eliot making sense in the wake of all that loss of life, of grief and rebirth and time and memory, and how time perhaps isn't linear. It's much more complex. And we were telling a story which was, then I opened the first page of the Four Quartets, and I think the very first line is, time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. And I gave a copy to Eric Martin, and 2 months later he presented me with the first episode, and Loki was time slipping from time present into time past and into time future. So I'm sort of hoping that, I think Elliot had it, I gave it to Eric and said, I don't know if this will help you, I hope it does. Let it, take a line and let it inspire you. I just knew it was a rich source of material. There's another line, I think, in the poem, how does it go? And this really relates to, I think you've just seen episodes 5 and 6, am I correct?
Yeah.
There's a beautiful passage in the latter part of the last quartet, which runs something like this. And what you thought you came for is only a shell, a husk of meaning, from which the purpose breaks only when it is fulfilled. Either you had no purpose, or the purpose is beyond the end you figured and is altered in fulfillment. And I looked at it, I thought, that's Loki. And what you thought you came for is only a shell, a husk of meaning. Anyway, I draw inspiration from everywhere.